My daughter spat on me before the whole family, her eyes burning with contempt. The golden pocket watch I had once given her, my father's heirloom, slipped from her hand and clattered against the floor. No one spoke for me. Not a soul. My chest tightened. The child I carried in my arms now treated me as dirt. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when my daughter looked at me with love, not disgust. I can still see her as a little girl, her arms wrapped around my neck, her hair tickling my cheek as she called me Papa, in that sweet, high-pitched voice. In those days, the pocket watch was more than just metal and gears. It was hope. It was continuity. The watch had belonged to my father. He gave it to me on my wedding day, pressing it into my hand as though he were passing down more than just time. "This will remind you," he said, "that family is the only treasure worth guarding." I kept it in my vest pocket every day after, not because I cared about its value, but because I cared about what it represented. When my wife, Marjorie, passed far too young, the watch became something else entirely. I would place it on the table beside our baby's crib at night. I'd listen to the soft tick, 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 while rocking her to sleep, convincing myself that as long as time moved forward, I could somehow carry on without breaking. That watch kept me alive in those years. It reminded me that she still needed me, and that I had to honor Marjorie's last words, "Take care of her. She's your whole world now." I worked long hours at the factory, sweat dripping down my back, fingers blistered, lungs coated with dust. I didn't complain. Every paycheck meant a roof over her head, school supplies, and food on the table. I skipped meals sometimes, but she never went hungry. On cold mornings, I patched her coat instead of buying myself a new one. She never knew the sacrifices, and I never wanted her to. That's what a father does. Every milestone of her childhood had the watch nearby. The day she learned to ride her bike, I pulled it from my pocket and checked the time, pretending it was a race against the clock. She laughed, wobbling down the street. "I beat you, Papa. I'm faster than time." The day she graduated high school, I stood in the crowd, the watch in my palm. I swore I felt my father's hand in mine that day, proud of the granddaughter he never got to meet. When she got married, I sat in the front pew with the watch heavy in my pocket. My heart swelled with pride. She looked radiant, glowing in white, and when she turned to look at me before walking down the aisle, I saw Marjorie's smile in her. I remember whispering to myself, "We did it, Marjorie. We gave her a good life." In those years, my daughter was loyal, protective even. She'd fuss at me for working too hard, tell me to rest, bring me tea. On Father's Day, she surprised me with a small display case where I could keep the watch safe when I wasn't wearing it. She polished it herself, tracing the initials my father had engraved into the back, HS to RS, "Time is our bond." She kissed me on the cheek that day and said, "Papa, I'll treasure this one day like you do." I believed her. God help me, I believed every word. Life wasn't perfect, but it was filled with small joys. Sunday dinners, where she'd chatter about school or later about her job. Afternoons on the porch, where she'd read her books and lean against my shoulder. She had friends, dreams, ambitions, but she never made me feel forgotten. I was her anchor. And the watch, well, it was our silent witness. But even in those good years, there were small shadows I ignored. Like the time she mentioned how old-fashioned it looked. Or the time her husband-to-be, then just her boyfriend, joked, "You could probably sell that thing and get a new car." She had laughed, not in cruelty, but in that casual way young people laugh off tradition. I brushed it aside. Love blinds you not just in romance, but in parenthood too. When I think back now, I realize the distance began quietly, like the slow unwinding of a spring inside that watch. At first, nothing seems different. But one day, the ticking slows, and before you know it, silence creeps in. Still, those memories of loyalty keep me from turning bitter even now. I can close my eyes and see her standing in the doorway, holding out her report card with pride. I can feel her hand gripping mine on the bus rides home, the same hand that one day would slip from my grasp. I remember one night in particular. She must have been 12. I had fallen asleep in the armchair, the watch resting on my chest. I woke to find her covering me with a blanket. She picked up the watch, turned it over gently in her hands, and whispered, "One day, Papa, I'll take care of you the way you take care of me." My heart broke when I remembered that promise. Because somewhere along the way, she forgot. Or maybe she never meant it at all. But in those good years, I didn't see the future. I only saw the present. I saw a little girl who needed me, who loved me, who promised me the world. I saw the daughter who made me proud to carry on, who gave meaning to every scar and blister I carried from work. And through it all, the pocket watch ticked faithfully. Tick, 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 a steady rhythm that matched my heart. It was as though time itself promised me, "She will always love you." I didn't know then that time lies. But the ticking grew fainter, as her love slowly dimmed. The first scratches appeared, not on the watch, but in her tone. At first, it was little things. My daughter used to listen patiently to my stories. I've never been much of a talker, but sometimes I'd go on about my days at the factory, or tell her about her mother when she was small. She used to smile, even if she'd heard the same story before. But one evening, when I repeated a memory about Marjorie's laugh, my daughter sighed loudly and said, "Papa, you've told me that 100 times already." It was a small comment, perhaps harmless on its own. But it stung. I noticed the pocket watch on the table between us as she said it, the same watch I had once used to time her bedtime stories. I found myself rubbing the glass face with my thumb, polishing away smudges that weren't there. For the first time, the watch didn't feel like a bond. It felt like a reminder that maybe I was slipping behind, stuck in the past while she rushed ahead. I brushed it off. Children grow impatient. Life gets busy. That's what I told myself. But then came other signs. Phone calls grew shorter. She'd call on Sundays, but the conversations became mechanical. "Yes, Papa, I'm fine. Work is good. We're busy. I'll see you soon." I could hear her husband in the background sometimes, his voice muffled, telling her to hurry up. Soon, even those calls became less frequent. When they visited, her husband always seemed restless, eyes darting to his phone. Once, I caught him staring at the watch where it hung in its little display case. He chuckled, "That old thing must be worth something. You should appraise it." I laughed politely, but the way his eyes lingered on it made my stomach tighten. I noticed my daughter didn't scold him the way she once would have. She didn't defend the watch or me. She just looked away, fiddling with her necklace. That silence, it was louder than any insult. Neighbors began to notice, too. Mrs. Harris, who lived across the street, asked me once why my daughter hadn't come by to help shovel snow. I shrugged it off, saying she was busy. But Mrs. Harris pursed her lips and said, "She used to be here every weekend." What changed? I didn't know how to answer. The watch, once proudly displayed in the living room, somehow ended up in a drawer. Not because I put it there, but because one day, after my daughter visited, I found it tucked away. "It's safer in here, Papa," she told me casually when I asked. "You don't want it getting lost or stolen." But something in her tone felt off. The watch wasn't safer, it was hidden, like she was ashamed of it, or maybe of me. Time seemed to shift along with her. Tick, 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 the watch kept steady, but her presence faltered. I tried to adapt. When she brushed off my stories, I stayed quiet. When she didn't visit, I told myself she was busy. But inside, a heaviness grew. I had given her everything, and yet I felt as though I was slowly fading from her world. One evening, she brought up the idea of downsizing. We were sitting at the kitchen table, the watch resting between us like a silent judge. "Papa," she began, in that rehearsed tone people use when they're about to tell you something they know you won't like, "don't you think this house is a little big for you? You'd be more comfortable in a smaller place. Maybe even a retirement community. You'd have friends there, activities." Her words blurred after that. All I could hear was the ticking. I clutched the watch so tightly my palm ached. "This is my home," I told her firmly. She smiled politely, but I could see her husband's smirk from the corner of my eye. He didn't even try to hide it. That night, after they left, I sat in the living room alone. The watch lay heavy in my hand. I opened the back, revealing the tiny engraving my father had carved, "Time is our bond." I whispered it aloud, over and over, as though saying it enough times could make it true again. But the bond was fraying. The unease deepened when I overheard neighbors gossiping. At the grocery store, I caught snippets, "She hardly visits him anymore." I heard she and her husband are planning something with his house. My ears burned, my chest tightened, but I pretended I hadn't heard. Denial is a strange comfort. Still, I began to notice patterns. She only called when bills were due or when she needed help with her car. Her tone grew sharper, clipped. And the worst part? I started hesitating before dialing her number, afraid of being brushed off. A father, afraid to call his own daughter. The pocket watch, once a symbol of continuity, started to feel like a countdown. Tick, 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 to what, I wasn't sure. But I knew something was coming. I remembered one afternoon when she and her husband were leaving. I stood by the door, holding the watch absent-mindedly in my hand. He glanced at it again, longer this time, and said with a chuckle, "You really should let us keep that safe for you, old man. Wouldn't want it to disappear." My daughter didn't laugh. She didn't scold him. She didn't say a word. She just pulled on her coat and walked out. That silence cut deeper than his smirk. As I closed the door behind them, I looked down at the watch. The ticking sounded louder than ever. It wasn't just measuring time anymore, it was measuring distance. Distance between me and my daughter. Distance between love and obligation. I sat down in my chair, holding it in both hands. For the first time, I wondered if the heirloom I had treasured all my life would mean anything to her when I was gone. Or would it simply be another item to sell, another dollar sign in their eyes? That question burned in me, especially after I saw her husband's eyes linger too long on the watch, gleaming with something far colder than admiration. I was present, yet treated like furniture. It happened at my daughter's birthday. I had been looking forward to it for weeks, circling the date on the calendar, even polishing the pocket watch the night before so it gleamed in the light. Birthdays used to mean laughter, cake, and her beaming face pressed against mine as she whispered, "Thank you, Papa." But that year, the house felt different. I walked in carrying a small wrapped box, the watch tucked inside. I had finally decided to pass it on to her formally, to mark her as the next keeper of our family's bond. I thought it would be the proudest moment of my life. The living room was crowded with relatives, co-workers of hers, even neighbors I didn't know. People chattered loudly, glasses clinked, and music played. I spotted her across the room, laughing with friends, wine glass in hand. She looked radiant, but when she noticed me standing at the doorway, her smile faltered ever so slightly. "Papa, you made it," she said, more like a statement than a warm greeting. No hug, no kiss on the cheek. Just words. I swallowed my disappointment and nodded. Throughout the evening, I felt myself fading into the background. Every time I tried to join a conversation, I was cut off, interrupted, or ignored. Her husband cracked jokes that made people laugh, but they were always at my expense. "Careful, don't let Papa near the wine. He'll start telling his old factory stories again." People chuckled, and I forced a smile, but inside, it stung. At one point, I tried to share a memory about her childhood, how she once demanded a chocolate cake so big it nearly collapsed in the middle. "Oh, Papa," she interrupted, rolling her eyes, "nobody wants to hear that." The room laughed again, and my cheeks burned. I glanced down at the pocket watch in my hand, still wrapped in its box. It suddenly felt heavy, like a mistake. But I had promised myself I would give it to her, and promises, to me, still meant something. When the cake was brought out, candles flickering, I stepped forward with my gift. The room quieted as I placed the small box in front of her. "This," I said, my voice trembling, "has been in our family for 3 generations. My father gave it to me, and now I want you to carry it forward." She opened the box, and for a brief moment, I saw her eyes widen. The gold gleamed under the lights. But then, just as quickly, her expression shifted. She forced a smile and said, "Thank you, Papa." No emotion, no weight. She set the watch aside, on a crowded side table between empty glasses and a half-eaten plate of hors d'oeuvres. I stared at it sitting there, like a trinket, as people began talking over me again. My heart ached. That watch had been by her crib when she was a baby. It had been in my hand when she graduated. It had ticked alongside every sacrifice I ever made. And now, it lay forgotten among crumbs and fingerprints. No one noticed when I stepped away from the table. No one asked why I didn't stay for the rest of the cake. I drifted toward the hallway, where the noise of laughter and clinking glasses grew muffled. Standing alone, I pressed my back against the wall and shut my eyes. I remembered Marjorie's voice, soft but firm, the night before she died, "She'll need you more than ever. Promise me you'll protect her." I had promised. But how do you protect someone who no longer sees you as worth protecting? When I returned to the living room a little later, the watch was gone from the side table. My chest clenched, panic flooding me. I searched frantically with my eyes, scanning plates, cups, the floor. Finally, I saw it, shoved into my son-in-law's jacket pocket as he laughed with friends. I froze. My hands shook. I wanted to confront him then and there, but something in me faltered. Instead, I approached my daughter quietly. "Did you put the watch away?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She gave me a puzzled look. "Oh, he's holding on to it." "Don't worry, Papa, it's safe." Safe. That word burned. Safe in his pocket, like I had handed over not just a watch but control of my past, my sacrifices, my family's name. I excused myself soon after, saying I was tired. No one tried to stop me. No one noticed the tears threatening at the edges of my eyes as I stepped into the cold night air. At home, I sat in my chair with my empty wrist. For the first time in decades, I felt naked without that watch. My father's voice, my wife's voice, all the echoes of the past that had carried me forward, they felt farther away now. I had given her the most sacred thing I owned, and she had handed it to a man who saw only money in its gold and gears. Humiliation doesn't always come from being shouted at. Sometimes it comes from being erased, from being made invisible in the very place you should matter most. That night, I stared at the calendar on the wall. Each square box was blank, empty. For years, I had circled birthdays, graduations, anniversaries. Now, I couldn't bring myself to lift the pen. I stared at the empty space on my wrist, realizing what I had given away too soon. The house betrayed me with thin walls. It was late, nearly midnight, when I heard them. My daughter and her husband had insisted on staying the night after her birthday gathering. They claimed it was because they'd had too much to drink to drive home, but now, as I sat in my chair pretending to be asleep, I realized it was convenience. They wanted privacy, not safety. I heard their voices drifting from the guest room down the hall. At first, muffled laughter. Then words sharpened into focus. "We'll have to convince him it's time," her husband said. His tone was low, serious. Convince him of what? I heard my daughter whisper back. That the house is too much. That he should sell. Or better yet, move into a facility. We can frame it as concern for his health. He'll believe it if you say it the right way. My stomach tightened. I held my breath, straining to hear more. My daughter sighed. He's stubborn. You know him. He'll cling to that house until his last breath. And what about the watch? He finally gave it to me, but you know how he is. He'll want to see it every time he visits. It's sentimental. Her husband chuckled. Sentimental for him, maybe. But for us, it's cash. A collector would pay thousands for that thing. Between the house and the watch, we could finally move out of this cramped place and buy something decent. I gripped the armrest of my chair until my knuckles turned white. My ears rang. The watch, my father's watch, the symbol of everything I had carried, everything I had endured, was reduced to cash. You're getting ahead of yourself, my daughter murmured, but her tone wasn't angry. It was cautious, calculating. No, I'm thinking ahead, he insisted. You said yourself, he's slowing down. Forgetting things. People at the party noticed it. If we play this right, nobody will question it. And once he's out of the way, it all falls to you. House, savings, the watch. Everything. There was a long pause. My heart hammered in my chest. For a moment, I prayed she would defend me. That she would say, no, he's my father. We'll care for him, not scheme against him. Instead, I heard her whisper, we'll need to be careful. He's still sharp sometimes. We can't let him suspect anything yet. The words cut deeper than any insult. She wasn't just silent. She was part of it. I sat in the dark long after their voices faded, staring at the empty space on my wrist. I remembered Marjorie's final night, her frail hand gripping mine. Promise me you'll protect her. I had promised. But from what? From the world? From poverty? From herself? Tears burned my eyes as I realized the truth. I had spent my life protecting her, and now I needed protection from her. The next morning, I acted as though nothing had happened. I poured them coffee, asked about their plans for the day, even smiled when my son-in-law made a crude joke. But inside, something had shifted. Every word they spoke, every glance they shared, I studied carefully. Where once I saw my little girl, I now saw an accomplice to theft. Where once I heard laughter, I now heard manipulation. I found myself holding the watch in my palm whenever they were near, as though its ticking could remind me of who I was before all this betrayal. Each beat of that second hand felt like a warning, time is running out. Wake up. That night, after they left, I went to my room and sat with the watch in the dim light. I pressed the button to open its case, revealing the engraving my father had carved, "Time is our bond." But what bond remained? She had chosen money over memory. Greed over love. I thought back to when she was 5 years old, sitting on the porch steps, asking me what the watch meant. I had told her, it means no matter how much time passes, we belong to each other. She had smiled then, her little fingers tracing the cool metal, and whispered, "Forever, Papa." Now, that "forever" had shattered. The betrayal wasn't just in their words. It was in the planning, the calculation, the rehearsed tones, the anticipation of a future where I was locked away, forgotten, erased. They weren't waiting for me to die naturally. They were nudging me toward the door. I knew then that I couldn't afford to be passive anymore. The man who had once sacrificed every comfort for his daughter needed to rise again, not for her sake this time, but for mine. In the quiet of that night, I made a vow. If they wanted my house, if they wanted my watch, if they wanted every drop of sweat I had poured into this life, they would have to fight for it. And I wouldn't go down quietly. I wound the watch slowly, listening to the crisp clicks. The ticking grew stronger, louder, like a drumbeat in the stillness of my room. I whispered to it as though my father could still hear me, "I won't let them win. Not while time is still in my hands." Have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments. That night, I wound the watch myself, promising it would outlast their greed. The time for silence was over. For days after overhearing their whispers, I carried their words like stones in my chest. Every tick of the pocket watch reminded me of their scheme, the way my daughter had spoken in hushed tones, not to defend me but to plan my undoing. I told myself I would wait, watch carefully, gather proof. But there comes a point when a man can no longer carry silence without it breaking him. It was a Sunday afternoon when they visited again. They came in all smiles, bringing groceries as though it were an act of kindness. But I knew better. These weren't gifts. They were gestures meant to soften me, to make me feel dependent. My daughter busied herself in the kitchen, unpacking items while her husband lounged on the couch, phone in hand. I sat in my armchair, the watch in my palm, its ticking steadier than my heartbeat. Finally, I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Why do you want me out of my house?" I asked, my voice calm, almost too calm. The room went still. My daughter froze, a carton of milk halfway to the fridge. Her husband lowered his phone and smirked. "What are you talking about, Papa?" she asked lightly, though her voice cracked at the edges. I leaned forward, placing the watch carefully on the coffee table so it ticked loudly in the silence. "Don't lie to me. I heard you that night after your birthday. Talking about selling my house. Talking about putting me in a home." Her cheeks flushed red. She glanced at her husband, who gave her a subtle nod. Then she turned back to me, a smile plastered on her face. "Papa, you must have misheard. You're getting things mixed up. We would never." "Don't," I interrupted sharply, my hand trembling but my tone firm. "Don't treat me like I'm a fool." I heard every word. Her husband chuckled and leaned back, folding his arms. "You see? This is what I was telling you. He's starting to imagine things. It happens at his age. Gaslighting. Plain and simple." I felt the rage boil in me, but I forced it down. Losing my temper would only give them more ammunition. "I may be old," I said slowly, "but my ears still work. And my memory works too. You want the house. You want the watch. You think if you make me doubt myself, I'll hand it all over." The smirk on his face widened. "Now you're just being paranoid. We've done nothing but help you. Who drove you to your appointments last month? Who fixes things around here? We're the only ones who care." Care. The word twisted like a knife. I looked at my daughter. Her eyes darted to the floor, then back to me. "Papa," she said softly, "we're only thinking of what's best for you. You're alone here. You forget things sometimes. It worries us. We don't want something to happen while you're by yourself." Her words were smooth, rehearsed. And for a moment, I almost believed her. Almost. But then I thought of that night, her whisper, "We'll need to be careful. We can't let him suspect anything yet." I picked up the pocket watch from the table and held it tightly. Its ticking steadied me, reminded me that I wasn't losing my mind. Time itself was on my side. "You're not worried about me," I said quietly. "You're worried about what I leave behind." Her husband laughed outright this time. "You think too highly of yourself. No one's after your junk, old man." His eyes flicked to the watch. "But that piece right there, well, that could be useful. Why let it gather dust?" I slipped the watch back into my pocket, my fingers curling protectively around it. My daughter's eyes flickered, guilt flashing across her face for just a second before the mask returned. The rest of their visit was strained. My daughter tried to change the subject, asking about bills, about groceries, about my health. I answered in short, clipped phrases, never letting go of the watch. They left soon after, her husband smirking as he patted me on the shoulder. "Take care of yourself, old man. Wouldn't want you having another memory lapse." After the door closed, I sat in silence. My hand still gripped the watch, its ticking echoing in the quiet room. I realized then that confrontation alone would not save me. They would twist my words, paint me as senile, convince others I was imagining things. I needed something stronger than anger. I needed proof. I needed a plan. That evening, as I walked down the street for fresh air, I ran into my neighbor, Mr. Walker. He must have seen the storm on my face, because he asked gently, "Rough day?" I hesitated, then nodded. He didn't press, but he said something that stuck with me: "You've spent your whole life protecting everyone else. Maybe it's time you protect yourself." Those words echoed in me all night. I sat with the watch in my lap, the engraving catching the lamplight, "Time is our bond." My father had meant it as a reminder of loyalty, of family ties that endure. But now, I saw it differently. Time was not just about bonds. It was about choices. Who to trust. Who to cut off. For the first time, I considered rewriting my will. The thought filled me with both sorrow and relief. Could I truly take away everything I had promised to her? Could I remove my only child from the legacy I had worked so hard for? I stared at the ticking watch. Tick, 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 steady, unbroken, unyielding. My father's voice echoed in my head: "Family is the only treasure worth guarding." But what if the treasure had already turned against me? I decided that night. I would protect what remained, not for her, but for myself. For Marjorie. For the years of sweat and sacrifice that deserved more than to be squandered. Their arrogance gave me the strength I needed to make my move. Walking into the lawyer's office felt like walking into a funeral, only this time, it was for my trust. The building was quiet, sterile, its walls lined with diplomas and framed photographs of smiling families. I sat down across from Mr. Thompson, the family lawyer who had handled my papers for decades. He was older now, like me, his hair thinner, his glasses thicker. But his handshake was still firm, and his voice carried the same calm authority as it always had. "What brings you in today, Robert?" he asked, opening his notepad. I pulled the pocket watch from my coat pocket and set it on the desk between us. Its ticking filled the silence like a drumbeat. "I need to change my will," I said flatly. His brows rose. "That's no small decision. What's going on?" I hesitated, my throat tightening. It's not easy for a man to admit his own child has betrayed him. Finally, I whispered, "She's not the same girl I raised, Tom. She and her husband, they want me out of the house. They're waiting for me to slip. They've even spoken about selling the watch, like it's just scrap gold." Mr. Thompson leaned back slowly, his eyes narrowing. He had known my daughter since she was a child. I saw the shock flicker across his face before professionalism settled back in. "I see," he said quietly. "And you're certain about this?" I nodded. "I heard it with my own ears. I won't let them win. I need to make sure my house, my savings, everything I worked for, doesn't fall into greedy hands." The lawyer picked up his pen. "All right. Then here's what we can do. We'll draft a new will. Your daughter will be removed as the sole heir. Instead, you can designate a beneficiary, or several. And if you're worried about her contesting it, we can add a no-contest clause. If she challenges the will, everything passes to charity." The words hit me like a cold wind. Removing her from my will felt like cutting off my own arm. But I had no choice. "And the watch?" I asked, my voice low. "I don't want it pawned off. It's more than money." He considered. "We can place it in a safety deposit box, held in trust. You can specify who inherits it, or that it goes to a museum, or even a veterans' charity. That way, it will be protected. I turned the watch over in my hand, tracing the engraving, "Time is our bond." For decades, I had believed that engraving was a promise between me and my daughter. But now, I realized it was a promise between me and the generations before me. My father. His father. Men who had built something with their bare hands and passed it down. It wasn't hers to waste. "Put it with the veterans' charity," I said finally. "They'll honor it. They'll understand what it means to carry time with dignity." Mr. Thompson nodded, jotting down notes. He spoke in legal terms, trusts, executors, conditions, but all I could hear was the steady ticking of the watch. It was as though time itself was agreeing with my decision. When the papers were drawn up, I signed them with a trembling hand. My heart ached as the pen scratched across the page. With every stroke of ink, I severed a bond one had spent my whole life protecting. The lawyer slid the documents into a folder and placed a copy in my hands. "Robert, I know this wasn't easy. But you've done the right thing. This way, your legacy is protected. And if your daughter truly loved you, she'll understand one day." I gave a bitter smile. I used to believe love was enough. Now, I know love without respect is nothing. As I prepared to leave, I picked up the pocket watch once more. Its ticking felt louder than before, as though it approved of my choice. I slipped it back into my coat pocket and stood tall. Walking out of that office, I expected to feel lighter, but instead I felt the weight of years pressing down on me. The sorrow of betrayal sat heavy in my chest, but beneath it was something else, resolve. For the first time in months, I wasn't just reacting to their schemes. I had acted. Quietly, firmly, and with dignity. Outside, the autumn air bit at my cheeks. I paused on the steps of the courthouse building, pulling the watch from my pocket. I opened it and stared at the ticking hands. Time didn't pause for grief, for betrayal, for broken promises. It moved forward, relentless. And so would I. As I made my way home, I thought of Marjorie. I imagined her beside me, her hand slipping into mine the way it used to. "You did what you had to do," she whispered in my memory. "You kept your promise, not to her, but to yourself." The house was quiet when I returned. I sat in my chair, papers tucked neatly into a folder beside me, the watch ticking in my palm. I thought of all the birthdays, the graduations, the nights I had placed the watch by her crib. Those memories still hurt, but they no longer controlled me. I had taken back my time. The watch ticked louder as I walked out, as if approving my choice. But life wasn't done testing me, another blow was coming. They stopped whispering and bared their teeth. It was a Sunday morning, bright and cold, when my daughter arrived unannounced. She didn't knock, just walked in with her husband trailing behind. I was sitting in the living room, the pocket watch ticking softly in my palm, when they appeared in the doorway. "Papa," she began, her tone clipped, rehearsed. "We need to talk." Her husband didn't sit. He stood tall, arms crossed, as though this were his house and I was the guest. I slipped the watch back into my pocket and leaned back in my chair. "Go on," I said. She took a deep breath. "You can't keep living here alone. It's unsafe. You've fallen behind on maintenance, the neighborhood isn't what it used to be, and honestly, Papa," her voice softened into a kind of condescension that cut deeper than shouting. "You're not capable anymore." Her husband jumped in, sharper. "This house should be sold. You'll move into a facility where people can watch you. It's for your own good. You won't have to worry about bills, upkeep, any of it. We'll handle everything." My jaw tightened. "Handle it for yourselves, you mean?" Her eyes flashed. "That's not fair. We're trying to help you." "No," I said firmly, "you're trying to help yourselves." For a moment, silence filled the room. The only sound was the ticking of the watch in my pocket. Then her husband scoffed. "You're being ridiculous. Look at you, you cling to that old trinket like it's worth more than your own safety. You're not thinking clearly." His words stabbed at me. I reached for the watch instinctively, only to realize my pocket was empty. My chest froze. I searched the cushions, my coat, the floor. Nothing. "Where is it?" I demanded, my voice shaking. They exchanged glances, too quickly, too smoothly. My daughter said, "What are you talking about?" "The watch," I snapped. "Don't play games with me. It was in my pocket." Her husband smirked. "Maybe you misplaced it. Happens with age." Rage burned in me. They had taken it. I could see it in their eyes, the way his grin widened, the way she avoided looking directly at me. That watch had survived generations, carried through births and deaths, sacrifices and promises, and now it was gone, stolen from under my nose. I stood, trembling with fury. "That watch is not yours. That house is not yours. And I will not be shoved into some facility so you can line your pockets." Her face hardened. "Papa, you're making a scene. Calm down." "A scene?" My voice cracked, louder now. "You humiliate me in my own home, you steal from me, you plot against me, and you call it care? No. You've crossed the line." Later that week, the line turned into a cliff. At church, where I still went every Sunday, the pastor invited me to stand and share a few words, as he often did with the elders. I rose, cane in one hand, Bible in the other. But before I could speak, my daughter's husband interrupted loudly from the pews. "Maybe someone else should speak. He's not as sharp as he used to be." The congregation stirred uncomfortably. My daughter, sitting beside him, didn't stop him. Instead, she added, "Papa gets confused sometimes. Don't take it personally." A ripple of whispers moved through the church. Faces turned toward me, some pitying, some doubtful. My legs shook as I lowered myself back onto the pew, silenced in the very place I had once felt respected. The humiliation was complete. They hadn't just stolen from me, they had stolen my dignity in front of my community. That night, I sat alone in my chair, staring at the empty space where the watch should have been. My fingers twitched, searching for it, craving the steady tick that had anchored me all my life. Without it, the house felt colder, emptier, like the heartbeat of the past had gone silent. I realized then that this was no longer about an heirloom, or even about inheritance. It was about survival. They wanted me erased, my voice, my presence, my very memory. But I wasn't dead yet. I pulled out the folder from Mr. Thompson, the lawyer. Inside were the papers of my new will, the no contest clause, the safety measures. My eyes hardened as I traced the signatures. This was my shield, my weapon. But it wasn't enough. They had already smeared me in the community, and if I stayed silent, their lies would spread like rot. No, I would confront them. Not in whispers. Not in private. But where the whole family could see, where the truth would cut through their performance. I closed my eyes and pictured Marjorie. She wasn't smiling this time. She looked stern, almost disappointed. "Don't let them bury you before your time," she seemed to say. "Fight with dignity." I opened my eyes and nodded. The decision was made. I would not wait for them to make the next move. I would choose the time and place, and I would make sure their masks were ripped away in front of everyone. The watch was gone, but the fight was still mine. When I realized the watch was gone, I knew the final battle was coming. If they wanted to treat me like I was invisible, I would make sure the world saw me clearly. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. A week after the church humiliation, my daughter and her husband held a dinner party at their house. It was meant to celebrate their wedding anniversary. Family, friends, neighbors, they invited everyone. Everyone but me. I wasn't supposed to be there. But I decided I would be. I polished my shoes, pressed my best shirt, and tucked the lawyer's folder neatly under my arm. I didn't carry the pocket watch, because I no longer had it. That absence weighed on me like a phantom limb. But in a way, its loss gave me strength. They thought they had taken everything. Tonight, I would prove them wrong. When I arrived, conversations stopped. Forks hovered mid-air. My daughter's eyes widened, then narrowed. "Papa, what are you doing here?" Her husband was less polite. "You weren't invited." I stepped forward, cane tapping on their polished floor. "No, I wasn't." But sometimes the truth shows up uninvited. Murmurs rippled around the room. My daughter forced a smile, her voice tight. "Papa, let's talk outside." "No," I said firmly. "We'll talk here. In front of everyone." I set the folder on the table and looked around at the familiar faces, cousins, old friends, even the pastor. "You've all heard stories, I'm sure. That I'm forgetful. That I'm confused. That I can't take care of myself." I paused, letting the words sink in. "Tonight, you'll hear the truth." Her husband laughed nervously. "Here we go again." I pulled out a small recorder from my pocket and pressed play. Their voices filled the room, sharp and undeniable. "We'll have to convince him it's time. The watch is worth thousands. Once he's out of the way, it all falls to you." Gasps broke out. Eyes widened. Whispers spread like fire. My daughter's face drained of color. Her husband lunged forward, trying to snatch the recorder, but I held it high. "You call me senile?" I said, my voice steady. "You call me paranoid?" "No. I'm not confused. I'm betrayed. Betrayed by the very people I gave my life to." The pastor stood slowly, his face pale. "Is this true?" he asked, looking directly at my daughter. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Her hands trembled, her eyes darted desperately to her husband. He looked furious, but trapped. I placed the new will on the table, flipping it open for all to see. "I have rewritten everything. If they thought they would inherit my house, my savings, my watch, they were wrong. Should they contest this, every penny goes to veterans' charities. They can have nothing. Not even shame money." Gasps again. A few relatives covered their mouths. One aunt shook her head in disbelief. My daughter finally found her voice, shrill and panicked. "Papa, how could you? After everything I've done for you?" I turned slowly to face her. "Everything you've done? You mean mocking me in front of friends? Hiding me away at parties? Stealing the one heirloom that carried your mother's memory? Selling my dignity piece by piece until there was nothing left?" Her lips trembled. "I never." "Don't lie," I cut in sharply. "The watch is gone. I know you took it. You and your husband. It doesn't matter if you sold it, pawned it, or keep it locked away like some prize. You've already lost something greater, my respect. My love. My trust." The silence that followed was suffocating. I could feel every eye in the room on me, but I didn't shrink. For once, I stood taller than my years. Her husband finally snapped, slamming his hand on the table. "This is ridiculous. He's twisting everything. He's old, he's bitter, why would you all believe him?" I lifted the recorder again, letting their own voices answer him. The room turned colder, the whispers sharper. People pulled back from them, chairs scraping, eyes filled with disgust. I gathered my papers, slid them back into the folder, and straightened my cane. "I came here tonight not for revenge, but for truth. You may smear me in whispers, but the truth will always be louder." With that, I turned toward the door. My daughter called after me, her voice breaking. Papa, wait. But I didn't. I walked out into the night, the chatter of shocked voices spilling out behind me. The air outside felt sharp, crisp, like a cleansing wind. For the first time in months, I felt steady, even without the watch ticking in my pocket. My heart beat strong enough on its own. Do you think the father made the right choice? Comment and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. My daughter's face went pale, but I wasn't done yet. The court would hear next. The house echoed differently after that night. I sat in my chair, the same chair where I had rocked my daughter as a baby, the same chair where I had once dozed off with the pocket watch ticking gently against my chest. But now, the room felt hollow. The silence was thick, pressing against me from every corner. No watch, no ticking. Just emptiness. The confrontation had given me strength in the moment, but strength is a strange thing. It carries you through the storm, only to leave you trembling in the calm afterward. I had walked out of their house tall, but when I came home, I felt the weight of years pressing down on my shoulders. I turned on the lamp, pulled out the folder of legal documents, and set them on the table. They were my shield, my safeguard. But paper cannot fill a house with laughter. Paper cannot replace the warmth of family. Word spread quickly. The town buzzed with gossip. At the grocery store, I felt eyes on me. Some looked with pity, some with admiration, and others with judgment. I overheard snippets. He cut her out of the will, you know. She was scheming with that husband of hers. Can you imagine? Your own child. Some whispered that I had been too harsh. Others said I had been too patient. Everyone had an opinion, but no one truly understood the ache of watching your only child turn into a stranger. I took long walks in the mornings, cane tapping against the sidewalk. The park was quiet, leaves crunching underfoot. I found myself stopping by the bench where Marjorie and I once sat, watching our little girl play on the swings. I could almost see her there still, her hair flying as she squealed, "Push me higher, Papa." I would sit on that bench, hand slipping into my pocket out of habit, only to find it empty. No watch. No ticking. Just the faint sound of wind rustling through the trees. One afternoon, as I returned from my walk, I found Mrs. Harris, my neighbor, waiting by my porch. She carried a casserole dish, her eyes kind but heavy with sympathy. "I heard what happened," she said softly, handing me the dish. "People talk, you know. I just wanted you to know, not everyone believes the lies." Her words warmed me, but they also cut deep. Lies. That's what my daughter and her husband had spread, whispers of confusion, senility, forgetfulness. They wanted me painted as weak, incapable. And maybe, in a way, I was. But not in the way they claimed. That night, I sat at the table with the casserole untouched before me. I traced the rim of my empty teacup, my fingers twitching for the absent watch. I whispered aloud, "Marjorie, I did what I had to. But why does it hurt so much?" No answer came, of course. Just the silence of the house that once held her laughter. And then, unexpectedly, came a knock at the door. I opened it to find my grandson standing there, awkward and hesitant, his hands shoved into his pockets. He was only 17, tall and lanky, with his mother's eyes but none of her hardness. "Grandpa," he said quietly, "can I come in?" I stepped aside, surprised. He hadn't visited in months. Not since his parents started pulling away. He sat at the table, glancing at the untouched casserole, then back at me. "I just wanted to say. I don't believe what they're saying. About you. About anything." His voice cracked. "I know Mom's been different. And Dad," he stopped, swallowing hard. "But I know you, Grandpa. You're not what they say." My throat tightened. I reached across the table, placing my hand over his. His grip was firm, steady. For the first time in weeks, warmth spread through me. "Thank you, son," I whispered. "You don't know what that means." We sat there for hours, talking about school, about sports, about life. He told me he wanted to go to college out of state, that he dreamed of becoming an engineer. His eyes lit up as he spoke, and I couldn't help but see a reflection of myself at his age, full of hope. As he left that night, he hugged me tightly. "Don't give up, Grandpa," he said. "You still have family. Even if it's just me." When the door closed, I stood in the quiet again. But this time, it felt different. Less hollow. His words had planted a seed in me, a reminder that love, even fractured, could still take root. I walked to the display case where the watch once sat. The glass shelf was empty, dust settling where it had once gleamed. I reached out and touched the emptiness, then whispered, "Time may be gone, but love isn't." For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself a small smile. But healing wouldn't come without building something new. I couldn't let my life end in bitterness. The silence of the house weighed on me, but my grandson's visit had stirred something inside. His words, "Don't give up, Grandpa," echoed in my head. For weeks, I had sat in this chair clutching emptiness, mourning the loss of trust, of family, of the watch. But maybe grief wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning of something else. The next morning, I woke with purpose. I brewed coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the folder of legal papers. My house no longer felt like a place I was defending from thieves, it felt like a resource, a weapon, a legacy waiting to be redirected. If my daughter didn't value it, then I would find those who did. That afternoon, I visited an old friend, Charlie, a fellow veteran. We had served together decades ago, and though time had grayed our hair and bent our backs, our bond remained. He greeted me with the same firm handshake he had given me at 19. Over lunch, I told him everything: the betrayal, the stolen watch, the humiliation at church, the confrontation at the dinner party. He listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening as I spoke. Finally, he said, "You can't waste the rest of your years waiting for her to change. You need to put that house to work." "To work?" I asked. He nodded. "Turn it into something that matters. A home for veterans, a community space, a place where people will appreciate what you built instead of trying to steal it. If blood betrays you, build your family from loyalty instead." His words hit me like a jolt. For the first time in months, my heart beat with something other than sorrow. That evening, I walked through every room of my house, cane tapping softly on the hardwood floors. The dining room where we once had Sunday dinners, the bedroom where Marjorie whispered her last words, the hallway lined with faded photographs. Each space was heavy with memories, but they no longer felt like weights, they felt like seeds. Seeds waiting to be replanted. I began making calls. First, to the local veterans charity. Then to a community outreach group. Then to my pastor. I told them I wanted my house to be used for something bigger than me, for meals, for shelter, for gathering. Their responses were immediate and enthusiastic. Within days, volunteers began stopping by. I watched from the porch as men and women carried paint buckets, toolboxes, cleaning supplies. My neighbors, some of whom had whispered about me weeks earlier, now offered their hands. "You're doing something good here," Mrs. Harris said as she swept the porch steps. "Better than any inheritance could." As we cleared the rooms, I found myself handling objects that once held weight. Old coats, broken furniture, boxes of forgotten things. Each item I gave away lightened me. But when I reached the empty display case where the pocket watch had once rested, I froze. The glass shelf glared at me, accusing, empty. I placed my palm against it and whispered, "You'll be back. One day." The missing watch fueled me. Its absence reminded me of what I had lost, but also of what I was building. I wasn't just filling a house, I was reclaiming dignity. My grandson visited often, rolling up his sleeves to help paint walls and move furniture. He whistled while he worked, and the sound filled the house with a kind of music I hadn't heard since Marjorie was alive. One evening, after we finished scrubbing down the old kitchen, he leaned on his mop and said, "Grandpa, this place is going to be amazing. Mom won't even recognize it." The mention of his mother stung, but I forced a smile. It's not for her to recognize. It's for people who will appreciate it. He grinned. Then you're doing the right thing. At night, I lay in bed exhausted but strangely content. My body ached, but my spirit felt lighter. I dreamed of Marjorie smiling, not stern this time, but proud. "You've turned the pain into purpose," she whispered in my dream. That's what makes time meaningful. The watch might have been missing, but its symbolism had shifted. Before, it was a chain tying me to family loyalty. Now, it was a reminder of resilience. They could steal the object, but they couldn't steal the meaning. I knew, however, that this new chapter would not go unnoticed. My daughter had surely heard whispers of my plans. I imagined her face when she learned the house she once plotted to take would soon be filled with strangers she had no claim over. The thought didn't bring me joy, but it brought me peace. The past had been hers to betray. The future was mine to shape. And just as the house began to fill with new life, she returned. I found family in those who owed me nothing. By the time autumn settled in, the house no longer felt like mine alone. The dining room walls had been painted a warm cream, the old carpets replaced with polished wood. The air smelled of fresh bread and coffee, thanks to Mrs. Harris and a few church volunteers who came daily to cook meals. Veterans gathered in the evenings, sharing stories, laughter, even tears. For the first time in years, my home echoed with life again. I sat in my chair one evening, Kane resting beside me, watching a group of young volunteers put together shelves in the front room. My grandson was among them, hammering nails with more determination than skill. He looked up at me and grinned, his face flushed. "This feels right, Grandpa," he said. "Like this house was always meant for more than just us." I nodded slowly. "It was meant for love, son. And love doesn't always come from blood." The word surprised even me. But they were true. I had spent years clinging to the idea that family was defined by bloodlines, by inheritances, by traditions passed from father to daughter. But now, surrounded by neighbors and strangers who treated me with more respect than my own child, I realized family was defined by loyalty. By care. By choice. One night, we held our first shared meal. The long dining table, once so empty, overflowed with food. Steaming bowls of soup, fresh bread, roasted chicken. Veterans sat shoulder to shoulder with volunteers, laughter spilling into the air like music. I raised my glass and said simply, "This house belongs to all of us now. May it always be filled with dignity and kindness." Applause followed, warm and genuine. Tears pricked at my eyes, but for once they weren't from sorrow. Later that evening, after everyone had left, I wandered the halls. Each room carried new sounds, tools clattering, voices echoing, footsteps filling spaces that had long been silent. It felt less like a house, more like a living memory. A tribute not to betrayal, but to resilience. And yet, even in this warmth, there remained a hole in me. The pocket watch. Its absence haunted me still. I would reach instinctively for it, only to find empty cloth. I told myself it was just an object, but deep down I knew it was more. It was proof of continuity, of promises unbroken. That proof, I feared, was lost forever. Until one evening, when fate played its cruel hand. I was sweeping the porch when I saw a familiar car pull up across the street. My daughter stepped out, alone this time. She lingered by the curb, staring at the house. Her hair was disheveled, her shoulders slumped. She looked thinner, older, weighed down by something heavier than age. I froze, heart hammering. She didn't approach right away. Instead, she stood there for several minutes, as if the house itself intimidated her. Then, slowly, she began walking toward me. "Papa," she said softly when she reached the steps. I said nothing. My hands gripped the broom, knuckles white. Her eyes darted nervously to the windows, where voices and laughter still drifted. "You've turned this place into something different." "Yes," I replied coldly. "Something honest." She flinched, but pressed on. "I came to talk. To explain." And that's when I saw it. Dangling from her wrist, like a piece of jewelry, was the pocket watch. My father's watch. My watch. The one she had dismissed at her birthday, the one her husband had mocked, the one they had stolen. The sight of it made my chest ache. The chain gleamed in the porch light, but to me it looked tarnished, sullied by betrayal. "You took it," I whispered, voice trembling. Her eyes dropped to the watch, then back to me. "I didn't pawn it," she said quickly. "I kept it. I swear, Papa, I couldn't bring myself to sell it. I know what it means to you." Her words were desperate, but they offered no comfort. To wear it like an ornament after reducing it to cash was worse than selling it. She had kept the body of the watch, but murdered its soul. "You don't know what it means," I said bitterly. "If you did, you would have protected it. You would have protected me." She reached out a hand. "Papa, please, let me make it right." I stepped back, shaking my head. "You can't make right what's already broken." Silence hung between us, heavy and suffocating. For the first time, I saw cracks in her composure. Her lips trembled, her eyes glossed with tears. But before I could say more, my grandson appeared in the doorway. He froze at the sight of his mother, his gaze dropping instantly to the watch. "Mom," he said sharply, "you don't belong here." Her face crumpled. She turned away quickly, walking back toward the car without another word. But the image of the watch swinging from her wrist burned into my mind, a reminder that betrayal was not finished. That night, as I sat in my chair surrounded by the echoes of laughter, I felt the hollowness return. The community filled the house, yes. My grandson brought warmth, yes. But the watch was still out there, tarnished by greed, dangling from the wrist of someone who no longer deserved it. When I saw her wearing it, I knew the courtroom would decide. I never expected to see her on my porch again. It was late afternoon, the kind of day when the sky turns a bruised purple before dusk. The house was quiet after the volunteers left, and I sat in my chair sipping tea. The cane leaned against my leg, the folder of legal papers resting on the table beside me. I had begun to feel steady in this new life, lonely at times, yes, but purposeful. Then came the knock. I opened the door, and there she was. My daughter. Her face was pale, eyes swollen from crying. Her clothes looked rumpled, her hair pulled back hastily. For the first time in years, she didn't look like the proud woman who once dismissed me, she looked like a child again. "Papa," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please, may I come in?" I hesitated, my chest tight. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, glancing around at the freshly painted walls, the tables neatly set, the sound of muffled laughter from the backyard where a few veterans lingered. "You've changed everything," she murmured. "This doesn't even feel like our house anymore." "It isn't," I said coldly. "It's everyone's house now. For people who know what loyalty means." Her lips trembled. She clasped her hands together as if in prayer. Then she did something that froze my blood. She pulled the pocket watch from her purse. It gleamed in the dim light, its chain coiled in her trembling fingers. She held it out to me like an offering. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I shouldn't have taken it. I shouldn't have let him." She stopped, choking on her words. "Please, Papa. I want to make things right. I stared at the watch, my heart aching. It was the same object I had once pressed into her hands with pride, the same heirloom I had promised to protect. Now it returned to me sullied, tainted by betrayal. You want forgiveness because you're afraid, I said slowly. Afraid of losing what you thought you owned. Afraid of being cut off. Tears streamed down her cheeks. No, Papa. I swear, it's not about the house, or the money, or even the will. She fell to her knees suddenly, clutching the watch to her chest. I just want my father back. The sight broke me. For a moment, I saw not the woman who mocked me, who schemed behind my back, who humiliated me in front of others. I saw the little girl with scraped knees, running to me with tears in her eyes, begging me to fix everything. But the weight of her choices pressed down harder. I remembered the night she plotted to put me in a home. I remembered the smirk on her husband's face as he pocketed the watch. I remembered the silence at church, the way she let me be shamed without lifting a finger. You can't undo what's been done, I said, my voice trembling. You can't erase the betrayal. Forgiveness isn't words, it's change. And I don't see that in you yet. Her sobs grew louder. She crawled forward, placing the watch on the table in front of me. Please, Papa. Please, don't shut me out forever. I know I was wrong. I know I don't deserve it. But I can do better. Just, give me one more chance. I picked up the watch slowly, feeling its weight in my palm. It ticked faintly, as if time itself had been waiting for this moment. I closed my eyes, hearing my father's voice, time is our bond. But bonds, once broken, are not easily mended. I opened the case, staring at the engraving. Then I looked at her, broken, desperate, reaching for something she had long ago thrown away. You may still be my daughter, I said quietly, but you are no longer my heir. Respect must be earned, and trust must be rebuilt. If you want forgiveness, prove it through your actions, not your tears. Her face crumpled further, but she nodded through her sobs. I'll try, Papa. I'll try. We sat in silence for a long while, her on the floor, me in my chair, the watch ticking between us. Finally, she stood shakily. Thank you for letting me speak, she whispered. She turned toward the door, her shoulders slumped. As she reached the porch, I called after her. Daughter. She froze. I held up the watch. This returns to me now. But if you truly change, maybe, someday, it will pass to your son instead. Her lips quivered. She gave a small nod and walked away into the purple dusk. I closed the door, my chest heavy with a strange mixture of sorrow and relief. The watch ticked steadily in my hand, but it felt different now. It wasn't just a bond. It was a judgment. Have you ever faced someone begging for forgiveness too late? Share your story in the comments. Her tears stained the porch, but the courthouse awaited. The final tick of justice was not in my hands, but in the courts. The hearing came on a gray morning, the kind where the clouds hang low as if pressing the world into silence. I sat in the courtroom with my cane resting beside me and the pocket watch secure in my coat pocket. Its ticking was faint, but it grounded me like a heartbeat. Across the aisle sat my daughter and her husband. Their faces were drawn, pale, restless. My daughter's eyes darted toward me occasionally, filled with something I couldn't quite name, fear, guilt, or perhaps desperation. Her husband, on the other hand, looked defiant, jaw clenched, arms crossed. The judge entered, and the room rose. The gavel struck, and the proceedings began. My lawyer, Mr. Thompson, stood with calm authority. He presented the revised will, the no contest clause, the recordings I had kept of their whispers in the night. He spoke of dignity, of betrayal, of protection, not just of property but of memory. Then came their turn. My daughter's husband rose first, his voice sharp. This is absurd. He's not in his right mind. He's being manipulated by outsiders, neighbors, lawyers, so-called friends. He doesn't understand what he's doing. The judge's eyes narrowed. Do you have evidence of his incompetence? He hesitated. Well, no, but look at him. He's old, forgetful. I rose slowly to my feet, my cane steady in my hand. I may be old, I said firmly, my voice echoing in the hushed room, but I am not blind. And I am not confused. I heard their plans. I saw their greed. I felt their betrayal. Do not mistake age for weakness. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. My daughter lowered her head, her hands trembling. The judge leaned forward. And this watch you mentioned, sir? I pulled it from my pocket and held it up. The gold gleamed under the fluorescent lights. This belonged to my father. He gave it to me on my wedding day. I carried it through every sacrifice, every hardship, every joy. I placed it beside my daughter's crib when she was a baby. I gave it to her with love, and she reduced it to cash value. They stole it from me. But it returned, not through love, but through fear. The ticking filled the silence as I set it on the judge's bench. This watch, I continued, is not just an heirloom. It is proof that time remembers. And time does not forgive greed. The judge studied it for a moment, then nodded. The evidence is clear. The will stands as written. Contesting it will indeed result in forfeiture to the designated charity. This court recognizes Mr. Roberts' full mental capacity and his right to determine the fate of his estate. The gavel struck again. Case closed. A murmur swept the room. My daughter covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking. Her husband cursed under his breath, storming out of the courtroom. I remained seated, breathing deeply, the weight of months lifting from me. The watch ticked steadily in my pocket, no longer a reminder of betrayal, but of endurance. As I left the courthouse, neighbors and acquaintances approached me. Some shook my hand, others patted my shoulder. You did the right thing, they said. You stood tall. Respect, once stripped from me, returned in their eyes. Outside, my grandson waited. He hugged me tightly, whispering, I'm proud of you, Grandpa. His words meant more than any verdict. Together we walked home, the autumn air crisp around us. When we reached the porch, I paused, staring at the house now filled with life and purpose. The veterans were already gathering, their laughter drifting through the windows. I turned to my grandson. One day, this house will be yours to protect. Not as property, but as a place where people find respect. And this watch, I placed it in his hand gently, will be yours too. Guard it, not for its gold, but for its meaning. His eyes widened, his fingers curling around it. I will, Grandpa. I promise. For the first time in years, my chest felt light. The watch ticked in his palm, steady and strong, as though time itself had chosen a new guardian. That night, I sat in my chair by the window, cane at my side, the sound of laughter and voices filling the house. The pain of betrayal lingered, yes. But it no longer defined me. What defined me was choice, the choice to turn grief into legacy, silence into truth, betrayal into justice. I looked at the photographs on the wall, Marjorie smiling, my daughter as a child, my father holding the watch. They were all part of me, for better or worse. But now, so were the volunteers, the veterans, the neighbors, and my grandson. Family by blood had wounded me. Family by choice had healed me. As the night deepened, I whispered into the quiet, Marjorie, I kept my promise. Not in the way we imagined, but I protected what mattered. And for the first time, I believed she would be proud. The pocket watch ticked on in my grandson's room, steady as ever. Time had not ended. It had simply found a new beginning.